Today, I want to talk to you about being more attractive in communication. As part of the research for one of my next books, I've got deep into the weeds with neurotransmitters, peptides, and understanding that actually you can manufacture attraction. I want to talk you through 3 neurotransmitters that can help you out. If you strategically understand the stories that you have that you can pull out at the right time to create a resurgence of the hormone that you would like in the person to trigger a certain emotion. Okay, it might sound complicated, but let me break it down. The first is dopamine, right? Dopamine is all about flooding the system. And the way to trigger dopamine is actually through the expectation. So when we create, it's called foreshadowing, but when we create an expectation of something coming, Netflix does this all the time, right? You're watching a Netflix show, you don't know who the killer is, you kind of get there, you kind of know that you're super close, and then you just don't know, and it goes on and on. That is producing dopamine. It keeps you hooked, right? It's stimulating you, keeping you hooked. So how do we trigger dopamine in someone else? We've got to surprise them. We've got to keep them on the edge of their seat. So find stories where you can trigger surprises, which are actually entertaining. That's going to get people to lean in. Don't just tell a bland story. That's why PowerPoints don't work. Remember, you are the story, not the PowerPoint. That's why it doesn't work, right? Because it's not actually coming from you. When you're able to be the communication and you're able to talk authentically and you're able to build that moment of suspense, it's called the peak moment, the peak end. People tend to remember the peak part of emotional intensity of a story, but also the end as well. So you need to create stories that have peaks in them of emotional intensity and surprise and expectation and build that a bit like a magician. So that's just one of the cocktail of hormones you want to start to get people to release. Today, I want to share something that's incredibly close to my heart. It's this book here in my hands. It's The First Domino. I wrote this to help you expand into new markets, to make the most of your first 90 days. Whether it's a new role that you've started, whether it's a new team that you've taken on, or your company has launched a new product or service, or you're just a founder and you really haven't landed that first major client yet. Imagine this, you're starting a new job and you're sitting down and you're opening up your computer and you've got 43 new Slack messages, a ton of new emails and content that you've got to learn. The pressure's on. Not only that, but you've got to go out and you've got to meet all these new people, these new staff members, these new clients. But most of all, you've got to add value. And whether you acknowledge it or not, you know the pressure is on. You know that this time is precious and that this company has brought you on for a reason. And you're there to prove that reason. That's one of the reasons I wrote this book. It's something that you can read on the weekend and implement on Monday to guide that process so that you can systematize the process of excelling and bring those trusted relationships forward and move the needle on landing your first major client. This book is going to push you to do anything but be comfortable. It's going to help you get breakthroughs. If we tip that first domino, we're going to get a chain reaction of success. That's why I wrote it. It's a playbook to understand the psychology of sales, the intelligence that you need to build leverage into your sales process. And it's for anyone that wants to do business development, growth, or just build their personal brand and take ownership of the direction of their career, their money, and their life. When you land that first domino, that first major client, I want you to post it up and tag me. If you are bold enough to take on the challenge, to really put it into action, to lead with heart, I promise you, you will change your stars. So if you're looking to create a generational legacy and make an impact, this is the first domino, and it only takes one. But what if you want people to experience more trust, more empathy, more love, perhaps? Well, that's where you're going to need oxytocin to come out. And how do you do that? Well, it's quite simple. You share something that's quite vulnerable. In the first one, when you're saying, oh my goodness, I've got goss for you, that's starting to build suspense. It's starting to build expectation into it. Dopamine is starting to come out. Versus with oxytocin, you might change your pitch, your tone, body language. You might look at the person and be like, yeah, it was really tough. Between you and I is one of the toughest moments of my life. You start to slow down. And I'm not saying you're faking this to bring someone on. This is all about stories and knowing the right story to create the emotion of the person you know that you want them to feel, right? Because if you want to bond with someone, getting vulnerable, being the first to do that is a great way to start bringing people into your world, to letting them get to know you. And in doing that, they're going to share as well. The reciprocity effect going on in live practice. And the third thing is endorphins. So how do we create more endorphins? So endorphins are fun, right? Endorphins are all about having bonding moments, and it's a fun time, smiling. You want to get people laughing. People feel good with endorphins in their system. And so to do that, tell a joke, use and leverage humor as part of your repertoire. So especially when you're explaining complex, boring stuff. I do this all the time. When I'm explaining things like big data or AI systems that aren't exactly sexy, they're not riveting, bring a bit of humor into it and saying, look, this is a lot. Prepare yourselves, guys. This is going to knock. I hope you had your coffee this morning. Getting people laughing, start getting the mood, get the barriers down. That's all it does. It reduces the barriers. People start to feel better about themselves. And in doing that, they're going to share. They're actually going to like you more. So back to the original point, how can we communicate more attractively? Because communication in itself is one of the most attractive qualities you can have. And so you've got good hygiene, you're working out, you're eating well, you're taking care of yourself. Effectively, you're just a good operator. Maybe you've got money, status, you've got all of these things going on. But what else do we need? So I think there's got to be this tension there. I'm not talking about romantic attraction here. I'm just talking about being able to attract people into your circle, being able to pitch yourself, to engage when you're in a lift. What is your elevator pitch? To be able to bond with people instantly, that type of attraction. Well, it comes from not necessarily being a pushover straight away. It being able to believe in yourself, right? Enough to stand up for yourself. I don't know if you've watched that show on Netflix, Beyond the Bar, but one thing that one of the senior attorneys is saying to one of his underlings is, look, you're a pushover. I just told you you couldn't do this, and you agreed and you walked out of the room. And he's telling him, if you can't stand up to me, how can you stand up in a court of law and argue your case? And he's right. And that's happening to us day in, day out. So part of attractiveness is not necessarily being a pushover and standing up to yourself and then agreeing. So having agreeableness weaved in so that that person sees that you might have warmed up to them. So that there's a mix there. If you're a complete pushover, yeah, it's pro-social behavior. There's engagement, there's empathy. People are drawn to that. But the most attractive is where you stand up for you. You have confidence oozing through you, and you're able to weave in those moments of agreement when it's authentic to you. So where does confidence come from? Well, confidence comes from courage. You have to have the courage to act, to take action on things, to risk rejection. And remember, rejection is just data. It doesn't mean you've failed. Rejection is just data. Having the courage to go out and do the things that you want to do gives you confidence. Courage comes from doing the things you don't necessarily want to do and put yourself in those situations, which then gives you confidence. Confidence is earned. It's making commitments to yourself, going out and taking action on those commitments, keeping the promises you make to yourself, and then that's how you fill up the confidence bank. And when you do that, you can feel it. It's an energy. It's not fakeable. When you're confident for confidence sake, because you've done the work, you've paid the price, you've been able to get rejected and hang in that rejection because you know rejection equals growth and growth equals development and success, you've got the right framework for living. And so there's an attractiveness there. There's an aura to it. There's a vibe to it. Because really, that's what we're doing. We're vibing together. We're sitting down and we're vibing. And we're having a lot of fun. And there's this transfer of energy and belief. And that's really what sales is. If you're trying to convince someone, have you ever tried to been convinced by someone that's just pushing too hard, that believes the more they talk, the more they're going to convince you? Well, that's wrong. We know that most people on first dates, most men actually on first dates, will overtalk and hog the airspace. And in doing that, they're not convincing anyone. Whereas if they just let it flow, if they were actually confident, they were actually composed and present, they would be able to have that energetic transfer, build that tension, build that resonance, and they'd enjoy it more. And so they'd probably get a second date. And it's a bit like that in sales. If you're too needy, too desperate because you care about your targets, your commission, your bonus, your credibility, your respect, your promotion, you, all the time, the client will feel that. Similarly, that'll put you in a needy space. But similarly, if you put the client on a pedestal as something that's unattainable, something that's totally not worthy of you, and that you're so lucky to have got this meeting, again, you're doing yourself a disservice. You need to meet somewhere on neutral territory. Don't meet at their office where it becomes this strange dynamic where you're trying to impress them and they sit back and decide which technology or which product or which service they're going to take. Make it more neutral. Meet at a coffee shop. Build that bond. Talk about the vulnerabilities. Talk with authenticity. Be willing to go where no one else has gone with them and take them on a journey and understand them. That's how you truly connect and build relationships. Give them opportunities to shine. That's how you change and become more attractive in the way that you communicate, the experiences that you put on the table for others, and the realness that you bring to every interaction that you're in. Remember, you should be connecting on a daily basis. You should be building your network, not because it's something you have to do, but because it's something that you intuitively do as part of who you are. That's where you get this super connector network that ripples across the whole of the globe. And you're able to make things happen with much more ease and speed than anyone else out there, because it's not just hustle, black coffee, and hard work. It's actually about being magnetic. It's actually about tipping the first domino and building your influence steadily, day by day, chipping away, becoming 1% better than the day before. I want to leave you with that because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what attractiveness is, attractiveness in business, energetic transfer, and also the position of belief. Believe you can do it. Believe in yourself. Believe that you deserve to be there and that you have value to give. Thank you. Until next time, stay passionate, my friends. Stay inquisitive, stay curious. Get out there and take one big, bold action that you know is going to move the needle that you've been putting off.